Oh, yeah, baby. Welcome. Hope you're all doing well. Nice. Nice. Look at those pretty people out there in the audience. Oh, wait. I don't see anybody but me. I'm that pretty person. Pretty baby. How y'all doing tonight? Welcome. Get your serious hat on, your serious face. No, I didn't forget. When are you going to do the next lecture, dude? When I get the time to read all of these dang books. I'm reading all the time. I'm trying my best. I'm sorry. We're ready. We're ready for the next section. I do want to hit on a couple things that I'm looking to lecture through in the near future. And that's going to be fun because this has been the Christmas of books. So many cool books just came my way. 2022 was the year of vindication and books, really. Put your game face on. And at the same time, I'm kind of frustrated because, so many of the people that are out there doing good content, doing good stuff. I'm not knocking everybody, but like nobody goes into the depth of what we go into here. I mean, you got me, you got Richard, you got big outlets like Lord Voldemort. Who else is really going into a lot of depth? And I'm speaking of people in these circles that get really deep into this stuff. And I'm just, like, why? So we got thousands of people watching stupid shit tonight, right? Why aren't they over here watching this right now? Are we whittling it down to the few fast boys and girls in the audience? Where is everybody? Are the mods conspiring against me to ban everybody from the chat and delete everybody, and that's why there's nobody here? Am I under a delusion that I thought I knew some stuff? No, I don't. I don't know nothing. I'm all deceived. I got an insane temple hat. I got reading glasses now. Confirmed boomer. But, I mean, 2022 was lit when it came to books. And vindication. 2023 is going to be off the hook, off the chain, insane in the membrane. What did I just get in the mail? Well, my publisher sent these. I think I just ordered it too, so I'm going to have to send it back because I didn't realize my publisher sent it. But we got Whitney Webb's Part 1 and Part 2. One Nation Under Blackmail. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And, I don't know if she said she might come on sometime. I don't know. Whatever. That's her choice. We got this old classic, which I read back in the early days. This is like a conspiracy classic, but this is very important to understanding, what's going on. And all of these happen, by the way, to be my publisher. Isn't that cool? Whitney Webb, my publisher. This old classic here, my publisher, needs to be done. Read this. I think I read this in 2005, somewhere in there. And I found an old PDF back in the day when I could read PDFs. I can't read PDFs anymore. So, look at that. How they create war and revolution. I mean, Professor Sutton's stuff is just excellent, right? And we lectured through Wall Street and the rise of the Bolsheviks. What else did we get in the mail? I already told you about those. Oh, yeah. We got... we want to get into the rise of the FASCISTists. Because guess what? They came from the same structures. So people recommended these. I finally got it. Yes, I got Trading with the Enemy by Charles Hyham. So we're going to look at that one. I got Guido Peperata's book... How Britain and America Made the Third RIIH. So we're going to look at that one. Little tiny mustache man, how he came to be by corporate financiers. And then I was reminded, somebody tweeted at me, this reference, which, I mean, there's so much in Tragedy and Hope. There's no way you can keep up with all this. I think it's page 10, 1049, that it was Schroeder Bank, which was formerly connected to the Bank of England. It was an associate bank, I think, of the Bank of England. And that's who got tiny mustache man in power. See if we can go to 10. I'm gonna have to put my boomer glasses on to do this, to be able to read this. Oh, look at that. I can see the pages now. All these young people, just wait until you got to get these boomer glasses. Then you'll know what it's like. It's not page 1049. Maybe it was 1059. It was something like that. This seems more like it. Yes, here it is. And look at that. I got my notes on it. Look at that. Boom, baby. Boom, batter. My pockets are getting fatter. Look at that. So, yes, I did remember this. And I did cover it, but I had forgotten it. Because this is a 1,300-page book. And every page is brimming with info. And it says the banks that funded Tiny Mustache Man. Here goes. Ready? By that time in the summer of 1953, almost irresistible forces were building up against Mossadegh. The lack of Soviet interference gave the West full freedom of action. The British, the Anglo-American, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the World Petroleum Cartel, the American government, and the older Iranian elite were led by the Shah. They all combined to crush Mossadegh. The chief effort came from American Secret Intelligence Agency, namely the CIA, under the personal direction of Allen Dulles, the brother of the Secretary of State. By the way, that was declassified like a few years ago, right? Oh, they finally admitted that the CIA was involved in the overthrow of Mossadegh. Everybody knew that. That was in this freaking book from the 60s. But, it's declassified. Dulles, the former director of Schroeder Bank in New York, was an old associate of Frank Tiark's, a partner in the Schroeder Bank of London since 1902, director of the Bank of England in 1912 to 1945, as well as Lazar Brothers Bank and the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. It will be recalled that the Schroeder Bank in Cologne helped to arrange Tiny Mustache Man's rise to power, 1933. Oh, it's base, it's red pill to serve the bankers, dude. Bankers are so red base and red pill. Yeah, man. Edgelord. Oh. Now, I mean, this is such an important text. And, you know, everybody's like, I can't get it. It's out of print. Well, then you should be watching my live streams about it. Where are you at? What are you doing over there? Diddling? Touching butts? Eating honey buns? Why aren't you watching this live stream, dummy? If you would hit like and share. We need thousands of people in here. Millions of people. This is dumb. I'm going to go watch lizards lick on TV. Yeah, goodbye. Good riddance. We don't need any more slow boys in the chat. Goodbye, Russell Gill Bates. See ya. This is not dumb. This is just over your head. Touching butts and eating honey buns. Touching buns and eating honey buns. So I'm excited. I mean, I think everybody, y'all saw we got this new treat come in from the establishment. This is a whitewash of the establishment, but it's a whitewash of the establishment that basically it vindicates what I've been writing about. Hey, mainline Christopher Andrew, did you know I wrote on this before you did? I wrote a book, Esoteric Hollywood. I talked about this. Oh, but it's not establishment, you say. It's not establishment, you say. And then I noticed at the end of it, he's the official historian of MI5. I noticed at the end of his book, his whole thing is about how now British intelligence is Skittles. Literally, that's the last page. And of course, because we're Skittles now, you see, we've accepted diversity. James Bond is no longer welcome in British intelligence because we've accepted Skittles, you see. I'm literally, that's the last page. He says even George Smiley is no longer welcome at MI6. The fictional characters, for those dum-dums out there that don't know what I'm talking about. He says even John le Carré's normie reality-based intelligence stories are no longer welcome because British intelligence says this is woke. We are woke. We are crooked and woke, you say. Well, good job. Let's see how that does for you and your Queen's Empire. Yeah, I wrote a book a long time ago about this stuff. But you said it wasn't the establishment of publications, was it? And the great thing about Ratiu's book is that Ratiu's read all the books I've read. And so he was way ahead of everybody in the sense of like, well, when he was writing this book, I was reading a bunch of the books that he was reading. So he was reading Mark Curtis's book on the relationship between Western intelligence and Muslim Brotherhood, radical Islam, etc. Kosovo liberation, all of that was a CIA creation. And Ratiu has read all that and understands it. So few people who go deep into this geopolitical stuff actually figure that stuff out. They'll like go into this and they're like establishment right-wing people or they're establishment left-wing people. But he understands that all of this was revolutionary impetus all of this time to get rid of monarchy. So he even understands it at that level, which is pretty wild. Right? So he understands the revolutions of the 1700s were to get rid of church and state. And he's connected so many dots because, you know, it's basically like part 3 of Quigley, right? So if we got Tragedy and Hope and we got Anglo-American establishment, then we got Sutton's works, right? Now, Sutton is a critic of the establishment. Quigley, a defender of the establishment. Ratiu, a critic of the establishment, but he's read all these works. I mean, he even got into the big old Stephen Dorrell beast, the history of British intelligence, right? And because I've not read this whole book. I mean, it's a massive freaking tome. I mean, it's like huge, right? 1,000 pages, and like every page is just, it's as crazy as Tragedy and Hope, basically. But I didn't realize that he's got a whole chapter on the Congress for Cultural Freedom, and that was a joint MI6 CIA operation. Interesting. He does, however, have a whole section on Lord Roth, Victor, as perhaps, I don't know if he calls him fifth man, but anyway. Turns out Malcolm Muggeridge worked for the Congress for Cultural Freedom CIA front as well. That's interesting. And I think the mathematician guy is the name Lord Rees. Is that him? He was also, a lot of these people, right, in the British public intellectual establishment, they're also part of British intelligence, right? And I don't think that makes all these people necessarily bad. The problem is that, like, a lot of these people thought in the Cold War they were really fighting Soviets. I don't think that's true about Lord Rothschild. He didn't think he was fighting Soviets. He was playing both sides. But a lot of the people who were involved in this were manipulated, didn't realize what was really going on. And so, yeah, anyway, just neat to see to see that all of that's in here. And by the way, this the whole Rhodes Roundtable stuff is all in here as well, right? There's a whole chapter on the Rhodes Roundtable stuff. So that's all true. This is mainline academic history of British intelligence. I mean, Stephen Dorrell teaches or taught at University of Huddersfield in the UK. This is published by Simon & Schuster. I mean, this is not a conspiracy book. It's a mainline academic. It's classed under military history. And he talks about Bilderberg. He talks about all that stuff. He talks about MK Ultra, Fletcher Prouty, all of that. Ian Fleming, T-Force, this whole section on all that. I mean, that's why I ended up getting this book, because I was looking for books on these topics. And I came across this book. And when I bought it, I didn't actually realize it was a critical assessment of British intelligence. So that's why this is good, because he's a scholar writing on it from a critical perspective. And I don't think anybody would call him a conspiracy theorist. So there's just a wealth of information and all this stuff, and it's really fascinating if you want to understand it. And you cannot understand where we are today without understanding this stuff. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, you can't understand why are they pushing this, what is it, what do they put it, they're calling it the 15-minute cities. Did you guys see this in the last few days? Openly saying, we want to put you into a 15-minute city situation in the coffin apartment living in Walmart and Target so that you don't ever have to go anywhere and you won't have a car anyway. And so everything will be within 15 minutes of you if you're allowed to walk over there and get it. I'm not kidding. Who did a satire video that's now reality? That's not satire?
In the future,
this?
we live inside.
Remember when I did this? You'll live inside a Walmart. 15-minute cities are saying you're going to live inside these Coon Pod, Walmart, Target cities. Literally. Who did the satire on this? Me, right there. Look at that. 2016.
Inside of Walmart.
Remember that? I didn't even realize when I made that dumb video they would move it this fast to right now. That's crazy. Where's my credit, by the way? Where's my journalism awards? I would like an award for journalism. I can't say my R's, but I want awards for journalism. So what do we have to expect coming up? Well, guess what? We're going to have 15-minute cities where you're locked down. We got the city on lockdown. Remember the old fat carb bloated me? I couldn't figure out what was going wrong. I'm eating all the vegetables I need to eat. It's because you're eating vegetables, dummy. That's me calling old me dummy. Dummy. That's why you're carb bloated. You're eating a bunch of dang critter foliage, right? When I see people eating salads, when I see people eating broccoli, I'm like, are you a rabbit? That's for critters, dude. That's critter feed. Where are the meat snacks? Where is the Slim Jim that I can snap into? I'm just joking. I wouldn't eat a Slim Jim. That stuff's nasty. 15-minute cities. That is, how do we get to this? This was planned a long time ago. A long time ago. You're not going to eat meat. You're not going to eat meat when you live in the 15-minute Target Walmart city because you're going to have a tracker that tracks your carbon allowances of meat, and meat will be banned anyway. You won't even get meat. You'll get Bill Gates's bug meat, right? You're not going to be allowed to travel. Travel will only be for the elite. You will not have freedom of commerce because they'll turn off your credits, your central bank digital currency fake credits for bad words that you say. And you won't have family because families are going to be outlawed. So I wonder where any of these ideas came. It's called Brave New World. A guy in the circles of the British intelligence people that we're talking about. Agenda 21, the Rio Bush Treaty, UN Biodiversity Project, Wildlands Project. It's all the same stuff. It's one plan. There's a million different documents. There's endless white paper documents talking about all this. So you don't have to read all the documents. All you need to know is that Brave New World is real and it's the plan. That's it. Just understand that. And it's all about reducing everything to austerity levels to reorganize everything. So when we look at these different wartime places, scenarios, when we look at revolutions that occurred, right? Bertrand Russell says that revolutions in Russia, the Kerensky, the 1904 and then 1917, these were experiments to see how does technocratic governance work in that way. Guess what? Mao was the same thing. Mao was an experiment Because Mao was a Yali, Yale in China. Who was in charge of Mao? Not who you think. They were in charge of Mao. Because they came out of Yale. Yali, Yale in China, was an actual program. And Mao was just a freaking nerd hanging out in this stupid nerd project. Yale in China. And they created him. Who trained Mao's guerrillas? Bill Donovan and the OSS. You're saying it's a communist conspiracy. They're not communists, dummy. They're above communists. They're above fascists. They're above all those things. They are zillionaire monopoly capitalist Malthusians. That's it. It's that simple. And Ratiu figures that out. So he's figured out the whole thing. As we have here. Have we figured out the whole thing? Pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, if you read the totality of Tragedy and Hope, you've pretty much figured out the big picture. Totally. Now, a lot of things have happened since the 1960s when, Quigley wrote that. And that's why it's important to supplement, with these other texts. But everybody's always like, what's this all mean? What is there a book I should read? Yeah, there's one book that you should read. It's 1,300 pages. If you're too lazy to read that, then read Anglo-American Establishment. It's 300 pages. And it has additional information that it's not in Tragedy and Hope. And we've lectured through all these for everybody. So why isn't everybody not doing this? Where is everybody? What? There's nothing better on a Thursday night, I can tell you that right now. Like, unless you're at some kind of a church function or something. But that's only for Orthodox people. If you go to a goofy Protestant church or a papal church, no, this is still better than that. You should be over here, not at that stupid stuff. I got Bible study. No, don't even go to that Bible study. The Bible study's stupid. Ooh, diss. Oh, burn. Oh. By the way, we picked up a little bit, but we're getting up to 400. Nice. We're about to get cracking. Get into the books. I got one more book I want to talk about, and then we'll break it open. But if you do want to support the stream, the way you do that is via the super chat function at Streamlabs. We don't have super chats anymore over here, but we do on Streamlabs. So thank God for Streamlabs. Thank God for Rockfin. Great debate. You talking about Pastor P? Thank you. We got a new debate coming up. One of these anarcho-libertarian boys called me out. A little redheaded boy called me out. So I said, all right, you want to do a debate? We'll do a debate. I haven't done a debate on something other than just straight theology in forever. But everybody's twerking on TikTok. They're too busy to hang out here. Too busy to learn some real stuff. So that'll be fun. That's going to be in like a month. So we have a TikTok, not TikTok debate. That would be funny. I'm going to twerk. I'm going to out-twerk that ginger anarcho-libertarian dude that I'm going to debate on TikTok. That'll be coming up in January. We got, hopefully, I'm supposed to be on Timcast. Hopefully that'll work. So that's supposed to be scheduled, as far as I know. Look forward to that. And yeah, we got a new ally in the fight. We are allied now with Richard Grove, Tragedy and Hope, Grand Theft World, Autonomy University. So shout out to Richard, and we'll be talking more about that later on. Last night we had a really long class last night. So last night's Q&A will be kind of its own lecture, because we spent like 2 hours talking about the history of secret societies after our John Locke, David Hume, George Berkeley lecture. So last night's philosophy lecture was that. If you would hit like and share. Yeah, you know what? I happen to find out, it's like Jeff Bezos' AI is working for me somehow. I don't know how that works. Somehow the AI decided that it loves me. It has a crush on me. Because Jeffrey's AI just sends me the best books. And then as soon as I buy them, they're gone. Like they go out of print because people buy them up. But finally, we have a vindication on whole other level with, good luck saying this Greek dude's name. To me, Greek people, man, y'all need to fix your names. I mean, it's not necessary. You don't need 25 consonants in a row in your names. Just, come up with put a number in front of it, Nikitas Siniasoglou. Nikitas Siniasoglou. Radical Platonism in Byzantium from Cambridge University. Now, why would this book be such an amazing vindication when it just sounds like some obscure, Platonism from Byzantium? That doesn't sound very relevant. Oh, you are quite incorrect. What's the subtitle of the book? Radical Platonism in Byzantium, Illumination and Utopia in Gemistos Plethon. Plethon was the famous Platonist scholar towards the end of the decline and collapse of Byzantium. Okay, so what? Who cares about him? Why does he matter? This sounds obscure. Oh, you think? What did Plethon prepare the way for back in them 1400s, the dark 1400 period? He prepared the way for the Illuminati. Yes, you heard me right. Plethon's cult of reason, which is an adaptation of his version of Platonism, was a quest for philosophical and religious brotherhood. Yes, there was part of it, the secret society there. That is, as other scholars, Masai and Medvedev have noted, not the former president of Russia, Medvedev, another scholar, Plethon anticipated the experimentations with the rational religion that would influence European secret societies and orders such as the Illuminati. Yes, you heard me right. Now, is this a conspiracy text? Absolutely not. It is not a conspiracy text. This is a fact of history text, history of ideology and philosophy text, and it is about the return of Platonism in Byzantium after Justinian and other people had shut down this silly stuff. Right? So Platonism the academy is banned after St. Justinian shuts it down, and then you get the Synodicon of Orthodoxy later on in the 800s, 900s, saying that it's stupid paganism. And this is the whole debate between Barlaam, Akindynos, and Palamos. Palamos says that this is Platonism and paganism, and ultimately atheism. So guess what happens? As Byzantium falls and collapses, and this comes to the fore, it spills over from Plethon's influence. Guess where it goes? Italian Renaissance. He directly influences the Italian Renaissance and their Prisca Theologia, right? Perennial philosophy. It's all based on Plethon's heterodoxy, paganism. So Renaissance occultism, we're talking Pico della Mirandola, Marsilio Ficino, then by extension Cornelius Agrippa, right? Later on. He's not in Italy, but you know what I mean. Where was Agrippa? Was he like Swedish or something? I forget where he's from. But anyway, amazingly, you get in Plethon arguments on the basis of natural theology, literally, for a world religion, a generic theism and world religion. Amazing. And this is literally what Plethon argues. And then Plethon influences, get this, Spinoza. Plethon is the Spinoza before Spinoza, stressing a natural, purely rational religion. And then that influences the Jacobins. Unbelievable. And why is it? And guess what? There's whole chapters on this resulting from the denial of the essence energy distinction. What have we said? Forever and ever and ever. There you go. Booyah. I mean, that book is good enough. I didn't even realize what I was buying. Jeff Bezos' AI just put it and said, hey, you'd like this. And I'm starting to learn to listen to this Bezos AI because it consistently, I mean, it told me about this thing. Or I might have seen this on somebody's tweet. I can't remember. But regardless, the Bezos' AI has told me a lot of good books to get. So, Not advocating Bezos' AI. I'm just saying that for me, it's helped. So he's sent me some cool stuff. So thank you, Robot Overlord. Okay, let's get back to this. So I think we got through about the first 100 pages in our first lecture on this. And we got all the way up to talking about the early Fabian stages, their influence and connections to Marx. They reformed Marxism. This is reformed Marxism. We saw George Bernard Shaw exerting a lot of influence. George Bernard Shaw wrote tracts and pamphlets that influenced big business magnates like Henry Ford, and Rockefeller comes under this influence, right? So we have to understand that David Rockefeller is dual influenced by von Hayek, who is one of his academic overlords when he's in school. And that's why von Hayek has the appendix at the end of Road to Serfdom for a world government, by the way. Libertarians, hello. Did you hear that? And in David Rockefeller's memoirs, he talks about writing one of his theses under von Hayek and how he was very interested in Austrian economics and all that. And then he goes and learns under Harvard, the Lasky at Harvard, the Fabian socialist stuff. So this is where we get the dual influence in David Rockefeller's paradigm. And this is all before he goes into doing intelligence work. Did you not know David Rockefeller worked in intelligence for many years? And in his memoirs, he says, my intelligence work is what helped me make all of the contacts that I needed throughout the world. Right? That, he said, is how I built my network. So he was networking before networking was a thing. Thank you for that big fat super chat there, Mel U. We'll get to that in a minute. Mel U. Is it like milieu? Was that the joke? I just now got that. We are in a Rockefeller milieu. We are breathing the spirit and the ethos of Rockefeller. So we had listed, I think, last time some of the entities. Did we do that? I think we did. We talked about the entities specifically established by the Fabians. Who, in other words, what powerful entities out there had a direct influence and creation by literal known Fabians? Well, guess what? It's quite a few powerful things. The study of international relations called the Bryce Group in 1914. And a lot of these things that they created at this time. Oh yeah, we can't see the super chats. Let's see if I can move that up so people can see. Okay. Some of these things, there's like the Anglo-American League that evolved into the CFR. Okay, so you'd be like, well, I've never heard of this thing. That's because it evolved into something else. The League of Nations, you might have heard of that. That was all set up by Milner-Fabians. Okay, remember this? Now that failed, and that evolved into the United Nations. By the way, Benedict XV in the history of the popes supported the United Nations. The League of Nations. And now, by the way, all the popes support the United Nations. So this is a obvious telltale sign to me. Remember when Michael Lofton said, yeah, J. Dyer thinks that the Pope is involved in world government. Yeah, I wonder why I think that. You think there's any evidence of that? Big Mike. The Court of International Justice, or the World Court, set up by Fabians. Royal Institute for International Affairs, which later becomes Chatham House. Chatham House rules. That's the original model for all the roundtable groups, right? Set up in 1920, set up by Fabians. Who? Lord Lionel Curtis, and John Maynard Keynes. Keynesian economics is Fabian economics, is CFR, is RIIA. Do you get that? And who was the model for their theory beyond Keynes? Arnold Toynbee. Toynbee being the London School of Economics professor. London School of Economics is a creation of these people. The Council on Foreign Relations, set up in 1921, set up by Fabians. Socialist Christian League, British Commonwealth, League for Industrial Democracy, the Federal Union Research Institute, the Fabian Colonial Bureau, Fabian International Bureau, the World Bank, Anybody heard of the World Bank and IMF? Those are Fabian, John Maynard Keynes created institutions. The Parliamentary Group for World Government, later called the Parliamentary Association in 1945. Then we get United Nations in 1945. Yes, set up by these people and the land donated by the Rockefeller family. The IMF set up in 1945 by these people, by Fabians, by John Maynard Keynes. World Council of Churches. Oh, have we heard of that? Remember Father Damick saying that there are no such things as NGOs that influence Christianity? Remember him saying that? Oh, so the World Council of Churches and the National Council of Churches aren't things. They don't exist. They're not private entities created by these people to influence religion. Aspen Institute, Socialist International, One World Trust, European Union. Have you heard of that? Do you know that was set up by Fabian socialists? Is that a thing? Have you heard of that? The BILDER group, 1952-1954, created by Fabians Joseph Redinger, Hugh... I'm going to have to put my boomer glasses on. I can't freaking see anymore. Hugh Gaitskell, Dennis Healy, together with the Rockefellers. Dave Rockefeller has a whole chapter on setting up Builder B in his memoirs. The Christian Socialist Movement, created by the Fabians in 1960. And then the Trilateral Commission, created by David Rockefeller as well. So, yeah, maybe these things matter. Maybe you've heard of these things. Oh, I forgot NATO. NATO set up in 1949 by Fabians. Have you heard of any of those things? Maybe this matters to... Maybe it has a significance. I don't know. Is it conspiracy theories? Or is it just history? Now, what was the governing philosophy of their ideological institution, the London School of Economics? Well, they pioneered this idea of, so we're getting over here on page 106, of management by expert, managerial revolution, Burnham, right? This kind of stuff. Oh, I forgot one thing I wanted to mention, too, that we don't forget. When Orwell wrote 1984, right, that was written on the anniversary in 1948 of the Fabian Society's creation. And yes, it is known and admitted that Ingsoc in the book is Fabian socialism. So what you read in 1984 is Ingsoc, English socialism, is supposed to be the Fabian Society. Same with Brave New World. Do you understand? It's the same thing. Those are two books about this. Management by experts. Fabianism does not, however, openly advocate dictatorship. However, many Fabians supported this idea, and in fact, Fabian leaders like George Bernard Shaw and Beatrice and Sidney Webb were vocal, eloquent defenders of both Lenin and Stalin. Their society had been named after a dictator, right? The General Fabian, Roman general. 1927, George Bernard Shaw declared that Fabians must get socialism out of these old democratic grooves, and that ultimately socialism really has nothing to do with liberty. Did you hear that, dumb socialists out there? Following the visit to the Soviet Union, George Bernard Shaw said in the 1930s, "I was a communist before Lenin was ever a communist. And now that I've seen communists, I am more of a communist than ever before." 1931. 1933, George Bernard Shaw said, "I'm actually a more extreme communist than Lenin is." Wow. What was the Fabian aim even in the 1930s? To create a technocratic controlled society by London School of Economic trained experts who would plan, regulate, and manage all areas of society and life, as the citizen would become a mere cog in a machine of the state, and the state literally viewing reality as a machine, aka technocracy. You understand? This is not analogy and simile and metaphor. This is literal machinery, technocracy. For example, many of the Fabian leadership at this time regarded Stalinism as applied Fabianism. Following the footsteps of Marx and Engels, Fabian leaders like Shaw believed in the creation of a new man. The new man would be a replacement for the older eugenics movement. Eugenics saw the unfit as those who, should be sterilized, etc., gotten rid of. George Bernard Shaw's preoccupation with this is evident when he points out that he had accepted eugenics wholesale. So here's socialist eugenics. It's not just a FASCIST thing. If we desire this type of civilization, we must exterminate the people that do not fit into it. That's a quote from George Bernard Shaw on the rocks. And then it goes on to say, we're going to have to mass depop. So there you go. And then he says, oh, by the way, we should have completely open BORDERS in terms of Europe. You can guess what I mean there. And guess who was behind the conversion of Europe to Islam? Was it exceptionally eloquent and philosophically gifted Islamic orators that have converted London into Londonistan? No. It's Fabians who brought those people in. So we covered all that in part 2 now that I remember. So we were not going to redo that stuff. But the next chapter was a little boring but kind of relevant because it was a chapter on the history of the Labour Party, which to me, British politics is kind of boring. So I don't really care about that. But we'll give the little rundown here. The reason it's relevant is that several of the proponents of what's called the Third Way, this would be people like Ed Miliband, David Miliband, Ed Balls, Andy Burnham, Tony Blair. These are all advocates of Third Way, which is it's literally the Hegelian synthesis of the Cold War. And I'm not an expert in China and Chinese economics, but it looks to me like China's mix of capitalism and communism is Third Way. But again, somebody who knows more about China can correct me on that. I don't know much about that. But I mean, people say that it's just a mix of capitalism, big capitalism, state capitalism and communism. That's Fabianism. That's the Fabian model. That's Keynesian type stuff, right? So that is the philosophy of Labour Party. So Labour's philosophy was consistently and always basically communism, but they wanted to make it more palatable to the average English person. So they put on the veneer of being for the working class. They were not for the working class. They were always an elite party. And they always advocated a socialist world government, and as did NATO, amazingly. You say, wait a minute, NATO, that we were against the communists. Well, as he points out, no, Labor was instrumental in the creation of the United Nations, the Labor Party. It was run by pro-Soviet socialists, and it was advised by Soviet communist officials. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization ostensibly was there to contain the expansion of Soviet and Chinese communism. However, NATO was in fact used by the Attlee government as a smokescreen to make deals with many communist regimes and to promote world socialism. In a 1952 essay with an introduction by Attlee, leading Labourite and Fabian Richard Crossman wrote, "A victory for either side would be a defeat for socialism. We are members of NATO. This does not mean that we are enemies of communism." So, well, there you go. Labour Party advocates were then calling for, at this time, labor camps. Amazing, right? Well into the 1960s, the Labour Party under Fabian Harold Wilson promoted the idea that it was popular in that was done in the Soviet Union to have concentration camps and labor camps for political dissidents. So, what did we just hear on the news the other day? What is it out of, I can't remember if it's in New Zealand or Australia, where they're like, oh, we need to put the dissidents and the terrorists, people that talk about conspiracies, they need to be put in these camps. Okay. I mean, this is the collapse of your country. You understand that, right? I mean, amazing. So, why is this happening? Because people don't know what has happened in history. People are willfully ignorant. They want to be retard. And when we choose to be retard, we pay the cost. The Labour Party literally had the plan, I'm not kidding, this is kind of wild, to run up giant debts. And this is a leftist model of probably like Cloward and Piven, right, in the U.S. Labor's Keynesian policy of perpetual deficit is actually part of the Fabian strategy to destroy the existing order to bring in their system. They literally do that on purpose. And which is funny because if you remember in Babylon Berlin, they have the FASCISTS behind the crashing of the market and then buying everything up, which that's possible. That could have happened in Weimar Germany. I'm not sure. I don't know how historically accurate that is. But the funny thing is that that's actually a Fabian plan to do that. Maybe there's a tiny mustache man's people had a plan to do that. I don't know. There probably is some overlap with the Fabians and those people. I'm not sure. But, really, well, who's behind Tiny Mustache Man? Oh, the same banks behind these people. That's who. So, very possible. Fabians eventually got a hold of the London City Council, which is pretty wild, and in the 50s and 60s, and they openly advocated Marxist Communist Manifesto's plan to abolish the family. Unbelievable. Can you believe that? So in the 1960s, you had labor socialists who wanted to abolish the family. Unbelievable. This is wild. By 2009, under Labour Fabian policies, the rise in broken homes in the UK had skyrocketed to levels never seen before, and the existing peoples, we'll say, had begun to be a minority. So, multi-CULT is 100% an open Fabian strategy, as well as the promotion of atheism. So they do the two-pronged attack to promote atheism as they promote Islam. Knowingly, which is amazing. Now, where does this come from? Guess who was the first person to talk about doing that? Bertie Russell. Bertrand Russell, famous atheist, said Islam would be a great tool as a chess piece for the reorganization of society. And at that time, in his day and in the 40s and 50s at Oxford, I think, Cambridge, they weren't bringing in like mainline Muslims. They were bringing in Sufis. So they kind of warmed people up with these goober, weirdo Sufi people. And then over time, it just became like all of Islam, right? And it's an intentional plan, according to Ratiu, who quotes the Fabians to say that from the Fabian perspective, they were interested in doing this to get rid of Christianity. So the Fabians literally saw Christianity in all forms, authentic Christianity, not their fake socialist Christianity, but authentic Christianity as their actual enemy, right? And so that's why they promoted atheism and bringing in Islam, because both of those helped to destroy Christianity and weaken the existing structure, the existing people groups. Do you understand that it's a known plan admitted by these people? And he points out, by the way, that the right-wingers are all fake too, and they never figure this out, and they never do anything to oppose this, because they're basically worthless. And all they do is become more and more liberal. So let's see. I think the next chapter is great. This is where it gets really meaty. History of the CFR. Now, we did, of course, cover this in Quigley, but we did Quigley lectures 5-6 years ago. So, this has been a while. Well, let's get a little refresher and get some updates beyond just Quigley on the history of the Royal Institute for International Affairs and its evolution into Chatham House in the UK, which is the model for the creation of the CFR in the US. So everybody understand that? So these are the steering committees and the institutes and the councils based on this model of roundtable groups of the Royal Society. And it's concentric circles of power that rule and govern in a public and yet also shadow way, because these are not hidden secret groups, these are public groups, but they meet in enclosed secret meetings, so it's a semi-secret kind of thing. And it is essentially what Quigley calls an invisible government intent on the creation of a form of one world rule, explicitly. In February of 1891, Cecil Rhodes, the founder of the Diamond Company De Beers, formed what he called a secret society of the elect. Yes, Rhodes was a Freemason. However, the Society of the Elect would be a separate secret society with some of the ideas of Freemasonry. But its explicit purpose was the extension of the rule of the British Empire throughout the entire world. Okay, so this is 1890s. And yes, this is because he is a frontman for Lord Rothschild. So Rhodes, Rothschild, Milner, they're all a part of the same group. Eventually it gets to be called Cecil Rhodes' Society, the Round Table Group, the Milner Group. Same thing. Rhodes' secret society was intended to be an invisible government by design, literally, explicitly. His original plan was that it should be a recapturing of America under British rule. However, that's not really what panned out. And instead, international finance, which is behind this society, ended up making alliance with the elites of the Eastern Seaboard in the U.S. This is called the Eastern Establishment. That's what is written about in this book by Sutton. This is the establishment coming out of Harvard, Princeton, Yale, right? These horrible universities. Indeed, the society, however, achieved the exact opposite of what was Rhodes' original plan. In fact, the dissolution of the British Empire and the subordination of Britain to international organizations like the League of Nations, the United Nations, and the EU is eventually what occurred. And so the plan became eventually, by the time of Woodrow Wilson and up into, they didn't succeed actually with Woodrow Wilson, but by the time of, as we'll see, William Donovan and FDR, they did succeed. And they succeeded by not just setting up the CFR and all that, but by the time of the 1940s, establishing the OSS and the CIA, which would constitute their private intelligence apparatus. So that's the real secret here, is that people, the CIA is a government. It's a captured government a long time ago. Yeah, it's government, but they're owned by these people. Literally, these people set the OSS and CIA up. The very first, or one of the first OSS heads, which we'll look at here in a minute, was a Fabian from these group. So we've got the Royal Institute for International Affairs being set up by, this crew here. This is what we covered in Quigley's Anglo-American Establishment. And it's connected to a lot of these. It also has predecessors prior to that in British East India Company, right? So that's kind of the earlier model of that, which was sort of what the British Empire was. And keep in mind that wasn't just, that's a trading company. They engage in free trade. No, that's a money laundering drug operation. The giant drug operation. That was the original intelligence networks, right, at that time. And so it's also the model for what Cecil Rhodes is doing, because he founds the British South Africa Company, BSOC, which again, same model as British East India Company, right? As the governor of De Beers and manager of Rhodes' business affairs, diamond magnate Abraham Bailey, the society's chief financial supporter, Reginald Balliol Brett, later named Lord Esher, friend to Queen Victoria, a Liberal MP, Alfred Lord Milner, private secretary to the Bank of England, Lord Goshen, etc. Milner then became director of the Rothschild mining company called Rio Tinto. At the same time, he described himself as an English nationalist. However, Milner was in reality a socialist and not a nationalist. So this group then makes an alliance with John Pierpont Morgan at the Metropolitan Club of New York, headquartered at 60th Street. Morgan was a partner and later head of America's #1 investment bank, Drexel Morgan & Co. This is later changed to be named J.P. Morgan & Company. And so this is where we get the connections to the Vanderbilts. Metropolitan's original members included railway magnate William K. Vanderbilt, James Alfred Roosevelt, investment banker Roosevelt and Sons, the uncle of President Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt's had a long-standing relationship to the Morgan, Vanderbilt, and Astor families. So here you have the American magnates, oligarchs, allying themselves to this British elite structure. This British elite structure is who is setting up British intelligence as well. Do you understand that? You can't understand the intelligence stuff without this stuff. And you can't understand this stuff without that stuff. So you see, understand this all goes together. And it's not conspiracy, it's just history. Let's see. So J.P. Morgan and his associates, August Belmont, Jacob Schiff, all belong to what's called by Quigley the Anglo-American or Eastern Seaboard Establishment. This is America's financial and academic elite based on the East Coast, New York, D.C. The Morgan Group then formed the New York counterpart to Lord Milner's UK group. This group together, both on both sides of the Atlantic, are known as the Anglo-American Establishment or the Atlanticist Power Bloc. It should be noted that this establishment's close connections to France through the banking houses of Rothschild, Lazard, Morgan, and Fabian, other Fabian groups. It could thus also be called more accurately the Anglo-Franco-American establishment. So like the Milner Group in Britain, the Morgan Group created a network of interlocking organizations and societies. Amongst these, one of the most important was the Pilgrim Society, established in New York in 1902, as well as in London, and respectively, Schiff and Belmont, in collaboration with New York lawyers, Lindsay Russell from Alexander Colby, Southern Railway Company, American Society of International Law, blah, blah, blah. Just a million different acronym things, basically. And then Secretary of State Elihu Root, all came together with the Carnegie Endowment, set up in 1910, formed by former steel magnate Andrew Carnegie, who had been influenced by Bernard Shaw and the Fabians. The Carnegie Endowment set up Elihu Root as its first president and formed immediate close connections to the banking powers in England. Elihu Root then went on to try to influence and cajole these people from 1918 to 1926, the Wilson administration, into immediately and completely advocating for international global governance. So they were trying really hard at this time to do it. This is where we get the 1919 Paris Peace Conference. The Paris Peace Conference was organized by the Society of the Elect. Cecil Rhodes's friend, Lord Milner, it was working there in collaboration with Fabian Society members and then in the J.P. Morgan Group, then changed the name of the Anglo-American organization to the Royal Institute of International Affairs. The institute was organized under Lord Lionel Curtis. This is the UK branch of it. Prominent member of the Milner Group. Blah, 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 blah. We've already talked about this. The American Group, however, included for its earliest and most powerful members John Foster and Allen Dulles, both from Wall Street law firm Sullivan and Cromwell. They were the nephews of President Wilson's Secretary of State Robert Lansing, and Christian Herter of the U.S. State Department, General Tasker Bliss of the Inter-Allied Supreme War Council. Among these providing funds to this institute was J.P. Morgan, Carnegie, and John D. Rockefeller. Together, these various institutions with the Milner Group and their board of directors included Ford Motor Company heads, Bank of England, Lazard Brothers, and N.M. Rothschild and Company. So it's all of these people working together. Do you understand? It's the Eastern Seaboard elite and these Fortune 5 or 10 companies at this time. From 1918 to 1926, the Royal Institute for International Affairs was busy setting up Chatham House, Pratt House, which becomes CFR. See if this then spawns the OSS and the CIA. The early 1921 CFR leaders, for example, when it was first established, evolving out of this other group, were Honorary President Elihu Root, frontman for J.P. Morgan, the next president, John Davis, worked for J.P. Morgan, was a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation, Vice President Paul Cravath of Kuhn and Loeb, Secretary of Treasury Edwin Gray, Harvard professor. Harvard was, according to Ratiu, a completely J.P. Morgan controlled university. So just like the Rockefellers they fund a lot of different universities, Harvard was a J.P. Morgan university. At this time, and the Quigley talks about this too, if you remember, they had already gained control of the media, right? So the major printing companies, Herald Tribune, Washington Post, Christian Science Monitor, The Times, Roundtable, Economist, Spectator, all these were controlled already by then by these people in the 1920s. Do you understand that? The wealthiest people who want to create a socialist world government control all the papers in 1921. Whitney Shepherdson, Rhodes Scholar, member of Woodrow Wilson's team, so part of the inquiry at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, later became the head of the OSS. So here you have a Fabian, Rhodes Scholar, part of the Milner Group. He may have been the first head of the OSS. I'm not sure. It just says early head. Or it says who became head. I don't know if he was the first one. Then we get Theosophist. No, other inquiry members. So remember, the inquiry is Woodrow Wilson's this is the proto-OSS-CIA, known as the inquiry. Frank Polk from Chase Bank. Isaiah Bowman, CFR, president of Harvard, part of President Wilson's inquiry. So you understand that, this is James Bond, dude, spies and intelligence. No, it's not. It's a bunch of boring bankers and scammers. It's not sexy, cool spies. Some of that might occur, but that's the low-level people that work for these people. Anyway, it goes on and on. J.P. Morgan was basically in the background of Woodrow Wilson. Ratiu argues that Woodrow Wilson was a J.P. Morgan frontman, and that's backed up more or less in, I think, Wim Hof's book on John Courtney Murray and the Jesuits. Now, why was the oil stuff such a big deal? Well, a lot of these people were bankers and oil men, and intelligence was relevant for oil. So geographical societies, get this, is pretty wild. There was these front operations called geographical societies involved in exploration when they were just fronts for oil companies. So what's all the intelligence about? It's about making money. Shocker. One of the first Federal Reserve bankers, Paul Warburg, was an early CFR member. Otto Kahn, early CFR member, and the list goes on and on. You get the idea. So what was the CFR's relationship to socialism? Didn't some of these CFR people, weren't they cold warriors fighting the commies? No, not really. Some of them might have disagreed with Bolshevism, but not in the end goals that they all share of a technocratic global government. The Milnerites that created the CFR always aimed to establish a socialist-style government and dictatorship headed by a technocratic elite. So it doesn't have to be one Stalin or Mao. It can be like Plato's, what is Plato have the Council of Night, right? The later Plato, when the Republic is governed by a secret society, what does he call it? The Council of Night or something like that. It's the same idea of this of the oligarchical technocratic elite. This is hinted at, by the way, in the very well-known book by Colonel Edwin Mandell House called Philip Drew Administrator, which is a story about the handler of President Wilson. In other words, Colonel Edwin Mandell House, who worked for the UK banking elite, was the handler to President Wilson. And that's what his own damn book is about. There ain't no conspiracies. Then it goes into a lot of the information that we covered in Sutton. I'm not going to repeat all that because surely you remember the money given for revolutions, the loans, the money, the fronts, Red Cross, all those things being fronts for the 1917 revolution against the Tsar that brought in Alexander Kerensky. So he basically just summarizes everything that was in Quigley and goes on to talk about that Woodrow Wilson was actually himself a Fabian. Like, he actually believed it. So we've even had Fabian presidents. By the way, he was a big pusher. Remember, this is what happened under at this time? What happened in 1913? Federal Reserve. Who was behind the Federal Reserve Bank? All these people. Same people. Shocker. So Woodrow Wilson was an open advocate of Fabianism. And in fact, here's the crux. All these activities, including, for example, Jacob Schiff's creation in 1907 of the Japan Society, are all at the background upon which the CFR RIIA global network emerges. So from 1907 to 1913 to 1921, this is the period when this power structure is arising in America. Okay, it already existed in the UK, but they're really rising to power in a kind of what we could call the shadow government way, right? In the US from 1907 to 1913, Federal Reserve, to 1921, to the creation of CFR. There you go. And then what do they do after that? Creation of OSS. Creation of UN. Creation of all these things. Creation of Trilateral Commission in the 70s. And don't forget that, lest you think this is all conspiracy jibber jabber, who does Zbigniew Brzezinski cite in technocratic era? Anthony Sutton. Exactly. Vindication. Now, what is the Federal Reserve modeled after? This private bank that masquerades as a public government bank. Its model is the Bank of England model. But as Sutton points out, the Federal Reserve is actually a private system with private stockholders. People may think that the Federal Reserve is a government institution, but it is a well-known fact that the shares of the 12 Federal Reserve banks, which make up the system, are owned by member banks, and the reserve banks issue shares of stocks to the member banks. What a scam. Unbelievable. Let's see. Moving on. Then he goes on to talk about the history of a lot of the people, the movers and shakers. Alan Greenspan comes up as a key figure here. From 1987 up to 2006. He mentions a lot of people I've never heard of from the CFR. Remember Paul Volcker, 1979 to 1987. He's another one of these characters. It should be noted that David Rockefeller, like Paul Volcker, was a graduate of Harvard and the London School of Economics. The creation of the Trilateral Commission, this allowed, I think, is he talking about Greenspan? No, he's talking about David Rockefeller being a graduate of Harvard and LSE, so which is again Fabian. And then chief economist at Chase Manhattan Bank. Rockefeller was also director of the New York Federal Reserve. So there you go. David Rockefeller was then succeeded by Paul Volcker. So at any rate, the fact that the Federal Reserve Board is dominated by regional banks like the New York Fed, these are all controlled by private interests. This was acknowledged by various authorities, from the Board of Chairman Eccles to the Congressional Committee on Banking in 1976. Session 2, 1976, mentioned by Sutton in his 1995 book. So there's, if people are, there ain't no proof. Well, there's the proof right there. Congressional Committee on Banking hearing of 1976, Session 2. Admitted to be private. George Soros, it says, was one of the members of the board appointed by the U.S. president. Wait. Let me go back. Members of the board are appointed by the U.S. president. It is not difficult to see how the elements of the Anglo-American establishment might infiltrate the system with the assistance of government executives with links to the same interests. For example, in the 1990s, the Clinton administration, which was bankrolled by the CFR, particularly CFR member George Soros. Then he mentions this character, Felix Rohatyn, was placed as the vice chairman of the Federal Reserve at the request of George Soros. And so, in other words, we can see this in the Clinton era, right? Just pointing out that, like, just because the president puts people in these positions, well, yeah, but the people who handle the president tell the president who to put in there. That's the point, right? All these boomers that think that, oh, the president's going to make the decisions. President's going to put things in order. He's going to clean house. The president is subservient to these people. As the banks involved, both Kuhn and Loeb and J.P. Morgan, Lazard had to continue to have close links to all of the foreign banks, particularly the Bank of England. I mean, this is just crazy. But there you go, right? Now, Ratiu points out that in concert with Quigley that, you know, the auspices as to why we need this thing is to protect the economy from collapses. Imagine believing that, right? So the Federal Reserve System is supposed to have these, you know, plunge protection teams and all this kind of stuff to protect through mass centralized control collapses. However, what happened after 1913 when the system started filching everybody? Oh, 1929 Wall Street crash. Shocker. What happened in 2007 and 8? Oh, housing crash. So it's just big scams. And the whole chapter on FDR in Quigley's book also proves that. It's all giant scams. That's all you need to know. That's the basics of it. Everybody's getting their energy siphoned off and ripped off. That's the whole point of all this. By stealing through inflation and countless other methods of stealing. And what's funny is that he wrote this book in 2012, and then it was kind of revised in 2016. If he had only waited 4 more years, because what happened in 2020? Oh, the big coof. And what did that do to the economy? Oh, ouch. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, they know that this does this to the economy. You understand that the promotion of EUTHANASIA, which is in Canada, right? Death care, banning of cars, banning of meat, banning of travel, all of that's intended to shut the economy down. Do you understand that? They're not dumb. And nothing ever changes because all the idiots out there in society, or the people that have any power, any audience, they all think that it's the dumb liberals. They can't run nothing. Where do we get them dumb liberals out of office? You're just as dumb as the dumb liberals, because this is what's really going on. And until you recognize that, you're not ever going to fix anything. What you're talking about is too complicated. I can't figure it out. It's too many books. It's too hard to figure out. It's too complicated. Okay, well then go play your video games. The CFR thus bypasses government. And it's not just the CFR. There are countless other think tanks and NGOs and organizations. Oh, have you heard anybody else talking about that for the last 10 years? But remember, Father Damick says that doesn't exist. There's no NGOs, no think tanks. They don't influence things. What are you talking about? It doesn't exist. I mean, you could go read. They have their own freaking websites. What do you mean they don't exist? There's no influence of think tanks and powerful government entities and private entities. That doesn't exist. Okay, so the Chatham House doesn't exist. Pratt House doesn't exist. Council on Foreign Relations doesn't exist. Brookings Institute doesn't exist. Rand Corporation doesn't exist. Carnegie Endowment doesn't exist. Institute for Strategic Studies doesn't exist. None of these things exist. It's all made up. I mean, you understand, I still run into people who say that. Like, I still encounter people on the regular who say that none of this exists. It's like, I mean, I have the publications of the CFR on my shelf up there. Right? I have multiple books from them. I have Foreign Affairs magazine. What do you mean it doesn't exist? And I can't tell if these people are like just trying to gaslight or they're that dumb, that normie, that they can't figure out these things exist. It's amazing. From 1922 on, the CFR has published a quarterly magazine called Foreign Affairs. It's a very famous magazine. You can find it in bookstores, if those even exist anymore. They're not full of Funko Pops. So what do you mean it doesn't exist? Well, and why is anybody still listening to the people who tell you that these things don't exist? Where is that person's discernment? If that guy can't figure out basic facts of this stuff, why are you listening to him for spiritual advice? How's he going to help you spiritually when he can't even tell you basic things that exist and run things in the world? I mean, why is everybody being so dumb? It's not even hard to find out if any of this is true. Like, what? You understand? It's not. These are history books. Are the people who think this is conspiracy? Are you going to say all the historians are part of a conspiracy? You're the one that's positing the conspiracy because it's in all these history books. Why is it in all the history books? If it's a conspiracy, so you're against conspiracies, but you're saying that the mainline academic historians now are promoting a bunch of conspiracies that don't exist. So you're actually a conspiracy theorist. By the way, have you noticed that nobody out there's nobody who would ever debate me on any of this. None of these people would ever dare debate me on this. How come none of these people would? I mean, if what I'm saying is so crazy and so dumb, would it be like super easy to just come on and easily shoot down this stuff? It would be easy as pie, and it would crush me. Everything would be crushed. The whole audience, oh, it's all fake. It's made up. It's all made up. He got owned. But the reality is, they don't have any idea what they're talking about, and they're mono-focused in their little niche discipline. They don't know anything else about what's going on in the world, and they don't want to know. So, okay, enjoy that. So how does this work? Well, they bypass government by these private, secret, semi-secret. They're not all secret. They're openly existing things. And rather than being like super secret, it's just have it semi-secret where people don't go to the meetings unless they're part of the elite. And then everything else is just public. So they literally most of the stuff is just all public. Why would they publish it if there was going to be a conspiracy? That's a technique, dummy. The CFR has influenced U.S. foreign policy by various documents and means, such as, number one, the CFR uses research facilities to develop scientific argumentation to support all of its policies. Science, bro. You're against the CFR? So you're against science? Have you heard anybody saying "I am science" recently? Maybe where that might come into play. Did anybody recently say "I am science"? CFR has historically dominated the State Department, which it infiltrated successfully with CFR members since the 1940s. CFR manipulates public opinion through its worldwide network of interlocking propaganda organizations, including mass media. Many of the CFR people work in media. If you've never seen that giant infographic, which is great, if you go to Lord Voldemort's, when you walk in, they have a giant wall-sized printout of that infographic, where you have the people that attend Beberg, the people that attend CFR, and the people that attend the Trilateral. It's all the same people. So how does this actually work? What's the mechanics of this? Well, he goes on to say that outfits like the Foreign Policy Association and its subversives existed in 1918 as the League of Free Nations Association, the American counterpart to Britain's operation of the same name. The British League of Financial... All these freaking acronyms are so annoying. Was set up by Lord Milner and H.G. Wells. The American clone was set up by Paul Warburg and Felix Frankfurter. From the earliest days, the Foreign Policy Association collaborated closely with the Institute for Pacific Relations, which was a socialist front which interlocked personnel who specialized on Asia. It has as it operated through a nationwide web of councils on world affairs. Council on World Affairs. These councils claim to inform the citizens, which is really just social engineering on policy. Thus, these institutions use public opinion and put pressure on Congress to consistently support CFR policies. Thus, they dominate the U.S. Committee for the United Nations and other groups, and in fact, they were involved in planning the establishment of the UN itself. They exert influence and control over academics, who the official academics are that we listen to, who the propped up experts are, particularly, by the way, people out of Harvard, Yale, and Skull and Bones people, because if you don't know, all of the original OSS and CI people, they all come out of Harvard and Skull and Bones. Excuse me, Yale, Skull and Bones, and then also Harvard. So it may be recalled in this context that David Rockefeller himself was on the board of overseers throughout the 1950s and 60s of Harvard. Last but not least, the CFR and its interests were behind the extent and influence and control over U.S. presidents and presidential candidates. How? By financing their campaigns. This includes, for example, Woodrow Wilson, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. And then we see this as Trilateral and Bilderberg people become national security advisors and literal presidential advisors, consultants, a.k.a. Kissinger, Brzezinski. I mean, Kissinger, Brzezinski were basically they've been there in the background for all of this time, especially Kissinger. Like how he's been there forever doing this. And I mean, do people not realize this? It's like he writes freaking books as the CFR Trilateral guru. I mean, does not exist? Does Henry Kissinger, is he a conspiracy? He doesn't exist. Brzezinski doesn't exist. He's a made-up conspiracy. The time of this establishment of the League of Nations, this was supported heavily by Alan Dulles. Have you heard of him? Do you think he matters? Have you heard of? Is that a conspiracy? He doesn't exist either. And the set plan of the League of Nations when it was established in 1919 was the creation of a socialist global governance. However, there was enough opposition to the League of Nations by American Senate and Congress that this didn't go anywhere. And Woodrow Wilson's attempt to push it failed. However, by the time of, the 40s, when the CFR set up the United Nations in 1944, these people had achieved enough power over the U.S. that they were able to succeed. So you understand that everything that we're living in now, all the stuff that I just mentioned, is this. There's not a million different conspiracies. There's not a bunch of dumb Jesuits Yes, Jesuits play a role. Jesuit universities sometimes supply CIA people. Sometimes Jesuits work for the CIA. But the real apparatus of the spy networks and spy structures come out of, nowadays, yes, some of the Jesuit schools, but really at this time it was Yale and Harvard and Princeton. That's where Skull and Bones comes from. Skull and Bones is what sets up the OSS CIA, these networks. Because these people are in that network, you understand? And their philosophy is everything that you're seeing passed at the World Economic Forum, because it was Henry Kissinger and the CIA and the Harvard Project that set up Klaus and the World Economic Forum. Do you understand that it is this? There is one conspiracy. It is this. There's not 10,000 different ones. It's not vril. It's not dumb alien crap. It's this. We don't need aliens. We have this. All that other stuff distracts you from this. And this is public. It's on record, and it's easy to verify. It's not Freemasons having a secret society going all the way back to ancient Egypt. Okay, many of these people don't care about that. Some of these people were Masons. Okay, sure. And yeah, this is Lodge 322. That's true. But not all of these people care anything about that stuff, right? They're priests of power. They don't care about esoteric jibber jabber. Some of them do, but not all of them. So while you're out there chasing down who's the real people controlling, it's these people. It's right here. It's like, it's not a mystery. All right, we know. We can figure it out. It's not a unknown secret group of 9 men that nobody. It's these people. Because these things exist, and we can verify and know that these are the things that pass laws, that kill people, that cause wars, create Federal Reserve. I mean, it's very easy to figure this stuff out. So what did the CFR do after this? Well, the CFR went on to create the United Nations when the League of Nations failed. Then the CFR created the BILDERBERG group, and they created the Trilateral group. And the BILDER group is where we get Klaus and Davos and WEF. It's all the same stuff. And until anybody can figure this out, nothing's going to change. And why can't people figure this? It's not even that hard to figure this out. Why do we only have 400, 500 people watching this? I'm glad we have 520 people now. That's great. On a Thursday night. Ooh, my Tartaria. Tartaria. Talking about a bunch of stupid stuff that is all there to distract you from what really is going on. So how's the world really run? It's run by this. And it's run by this. Now is where it gets really neat, because guess who these people set up at this time? So the Fabians at Bilderberg was created in 1954 by Fabians, Joseph Redinger, Hugh Gaitskell, Dennis Healy, and David Rockefeller. His memoirs, not even a conspiracy. It's public on record in his memoirs. Rockefeller, by 1973, had decided to act as chairman and instead establish a new post for rising stars Zbigniew Brzezinski. Sit down and shut up. From Columbia University. Kissinger and Rockefeller decided to create the Trilateral Commission in 1973, which they allowed Zbig to head up because he had written Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era. About technocracy. Duh. In this book, Brzezinski says national sovereignty is done. It's time to create a global technocratic government. Thus, he got to be the hub man at the Trilateral Commission. Let's see. Going on, we get more members of the Milner group. So here's the crazy part. What about the MI? What about CFR and MI6 and CIA? Well, here we go. Milner Group and its Morgan Rockefeller Associates had always been very close to Western intelligence agencies. Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SIS, or what is known as MI6, was an interdepartmental service of the Foreign Office during war times. It was known as the War Office. All of this was run by interlocking members of the Lord Cecil, Lord Milner Group. Or was Cecil Rhodes a lord? I think he was. Lord Rhodes, I don't know if he was Lord or not. Anyway, this was created in 1909 by Milnerite Richard Haldane. Its first chief was Mansfield Cumming, who was appointed by Undersecretary Sir Charles Harding, protege of Cecil block member Robert Gascoigne Cecil, or known as Lord Salisbury. So Lord Salisbury's protege from the Milner-Fabian group is the first head of SIS or MI6 in 1909. By 1940, the Milner group was now headed by Lord Lionel Curtis, who was again in charge of the Foreign Office and thus controlled MI6. Lord Halifax was the Foreign Secretary, and his former fellow Milnerite, Lord Lothian, was the British ambassador to the U.S. This was part of the Milner Group's global expansion plan. Thus, MI6 set up an American station called the British Security Coordination. This organization was responsible for operations, get this is a key point, in the entire Western Hemisphere, headquartered at Rockefeller Center, run by William Stevenson, aka Intrepid. In 1941, Stevenson set up the Office of Coordination Information. So, literal MI6 office is the beginning of OSS. 1941, Stevenson sets up Office of Coordination of Information. This coordinated various different intelligence services together for advising President Roosevelt, and thus this became named the Office of Strategic Services, OSS. In 1942, Wild Bill Donovan was appointed as the head. After the war in 1947, the OSS was reorganized as the CIA. The CIA, therefore, is a Milner-Fabian creation. It is part of MI6's global network. Baker Allen Dulles, his younger brother, from the CFR and UFO, from the CFR and UN co-founder John Foster Dulles, was its first director. Most of the CIA directors have also been CFR members ever since. Hello? In 1943, David Rockefeller himself became a member of the Joint U.S. Intelligence Collection Agency. He did this in French North Africa, where he was in touch with Henri Chevalier, the general manager of Rockefeller Standard Oil. David Rockefeller thus set up his own private intelligence network there. Rockefeller's personal involvement and the fact that by then German forces had been pushed out of North Africa suggests that these intelligence operations revolved around simply his oil interests. What about anything else? Well, the CFR isn't just involved in that stuff. They're interested in multi-cult and Islam. And I already covered that a little bit earlier, but these are the same people pushing that everywhere. These are the same people behind UNESCO. So Milner-Fabian set up UNESCO, and UNESCO is a culture creation operation. We've covered this for years, so hopefully I don't have to rehearse that. You know what I'm talking about. 1948, CFR members William Clayton and George Kennan established the European Recovery Program known as the Marshall Plan. This is supposedly to reconstruct Europe. However, in reality, it was based on David Rockefeller's CFR report called Reconstructing Western Europe in 1947. Its true purpose was to establish total Anglo-American establishment control over Europe. There you go. The intelligence services on both sides of the Atlantic were controlled by this group. They had key roles in the process. A key plank in the Marshall Plan was the cultural reconstruction of Europe according to the dictates of the Milner CFR plans. In In the early 1950s, the CFR-controlled CIA and MI6 set up what was called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Francis Stoner Saunders. And guess what? Doral has a whole section on that too, which I didn't even know about. And that's what I began this talk about. One of the MI6 CIA operations that Monty Woodhouse acknowledged was known as the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Subsequently resulted in the co-founding and funding of a periodical called Encounter, which is a vehicle for intellectual propaganda. This was part of an international battle for Picasso's mind. Pfft, give me a break. After the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia in 1948, MI6 suggested that to the Americans, it would be a good idea to create an intellectual haven for Western writers. In March of 1949, Americans began to consider their response to Soviet initiatives as in particular, a peace conference, which had been held that month in New York as part of the Communist International Bureau's, or Cominform's, campaign to shape Western opinion. 800 prominent literary and artistic figures were invited to repudiate U.S. warmongering. First response came from New York professor, editor of the New Leader magazine and the anti-Soviet left, Sidney Hook, blah, 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 blah. Then this gets interesting. This new group was the beginning of the Cultural Freedom Committee. His new group, Americans for Intellectual Freedom, was supported by the OPC, headed by, get it, Frank Wisner. Mighty Wurlitzer. Already looking for ways to counter the next Soviet peace conference. And so Frank Wisner together. Now get this. Here, this is where it gets crazy. I know that this is boring. Check this out. Frank Wisner's aide, Carmel Ophi, worked with trade unionist Irving Brown in organizing International Day of Resistance to Dictatorship in Paris, covertly underwriting the expenses of Hook's groups and delegates from Germany, Italy, and the U.S. The conference was on April 30th and proved to be something of a disappointment, and Wisner pushed for a permanent committee of anti-Soviet intellectuals, artists, okay? This is all going to be the promotion of art. This is where we get the money to Jackson Pollock, Andy Warhol from the CIA. This is where this is going. So, you understand? The idea was taken up by Hook and Melvin Lasky, staff member of the New Leader and editor of Der Monat. Lasky, who had worked with the German resistance movements against communists, had persuaded the U.S. authorities in Berlin to support Der Monat, a cultural magazine that would bring intellectuals into the free world. The first issue in October featured British writers Bertrand Russell, Philip Toynbee, and George Orwell. So there you go. That's the beginning of the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom, together with British intelligence, and invited to this Congress were many who were active in the EM. I don't know what EM is. Something movement. Anyway, a bunch of people I've never heard of, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, they were overshadowed by the key polarizing figures who showed up. Arthur Koestler, globalist, Ghost in the Machine. Pugnacious, energetic Cold Warrior Ignazio Silone, who was known as a gentle socialist moralist. Koestler had helped Soviet operative Willy Munzenberg to manage front groups for Moscow, had then turned against the Communist Party, and had written a highly influential book about Moscow trials called Darkness at Noon. Yeah, but he didn't change anything because he got an order of British knighthood or whatever, Koestler, and then continued to promote all of his technocratic socialism because he realized what was really going on. So he joined the same group that was really behind the real plan, not the stuff in Moscow, you see. Since Koestler worked for MI5, he was opposed by two wartime officers, A.J. Ayer, if you know about, right, positivism, A.J. Ayer, and Hugh Trevor Roper, who were to play a self-acknowledged mischievous role in Congress. A.J. Ayer served with the British Security Coordination, BSC, in New York, with Malcolm Muggeridge, and later with the Special Operations Executive in France. So A.J. Ayer, famous, is a spy. These stupid Anglo-empiricists like A.J. Ayer was part of British intelligence and was part of the Special Operations Executive, which is what Ian Fleming was a member of. And by the way, again, that doesn't mean Kessler was a good guy or bad guy. He was always a bad guy. And so when he defected and got his Order of British Knighthood or whatever, I mean, have you read his books? He says drug everybody, kill everybody, mutate everybody. We've lectured through the whole book. Oh, EM is Encounter magazine. That's the Congress for Cultural Freedoms magazine. I wonder if he goes on to talk about Andy Warhol and all that garbage. And Jackson Pollock. They all got CIA money from this stupid Congress for Cultural Freedom project. But the reason I brought that up is that I didn't expect him to mention Dorrell talking about all that. That surprised me to see that in this book. So, long story short here, the cultural reconstruction of Europe simply meant the Americanization of Europe through information, education, orientation, and agitation. So the Congress for Cultural Freedom was actually involved in agitation, agitprop. That's crazy. It was run by CIA officer Michael Josselson, and was funded by the Office for Policy Coordinating Marshall Aid money. Oh, so CCF is part of the Marshall Aid. Interesting. So let's see. The British Cultural Freedom Society received money from the Fairfield Foundation, which was a CIA front, and Lord Victor Rothschild, MI5, MI6 super spy, was related to, I guess he worked there. Oh, he gave money. Is that what it says? Oh, yeah. So Fairfield Foundation, which is CIA front, and Lord Victor, who was the fifth man probably from the Cambridge spy ring, is the one who was supporting this British version of the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And I think Richard mentioned one of the movie studios or film studios in London, which London Films, which is just a front for MI6, which is pretty fascinating. I would bet you money that that's connected to this. So, all of these operations were ostensibly designed, supposedly, to combat communism. However, they all invariably had left-wing activists and leanings. So this invariably strengthened the hand of socialism and labor, which it was supposed to be combating. The irony was that, just like the communists, socialist labor also agreed to the abolishment of private property. In fact, labor wanted to impose state control over all aspects of the economy and society. Unbelievable. So, yeah, hopefully we understand MI6 and CIA aren't really against communism. They're against maybe something coming out of Moscow, but they're not against socialism because they're all Fabians. All right. So let's see, how far have we gotten here? We've gotten pretty far. We'll finish out this chapter, and then that will be the next 70 pages. BBC, shocker, controlled completely by British intelligence. It is also a Milner-Fabian front. So if you didn't know that, hello. Right, and maybe that plays into events that occurred. Maybe the fact that the BBC is a front for this, could that perhaps have something to do with 7/7, Big 9, perhaps, and the reporting of those events? Maybe think about that a little bit. Inevitably, multi-cult was a key element in the construction of the Secret Service imposed New World culture. The idea of multi was first introduced by Milner member John Buchan, Governor General of Canada, later given the title Lord Tweedsmuir. In the 1930s, Buchan claimed that the strongest nations were those that made up of multi. Multipass. By the 1960s, multipass had become the official policy of Canada, along with basically the Londonistan in London, in the UK. So it's the Fabians that were behind Londonistan, and it was, as you guys know, as we've covered, because this is in the F. William Ingdahl books, that it was Kissinger and Bilderby that were behind the 1970s oil crisis. That was engineered by Kissinger and Bilderby by design. It wasn't an organic accident. Oh, oil prices are shooting up. We're using too much. Right, that was all engineered. By the way, JFK was also a big supporter of multi-cult, if you didn't know. In 1961, JFK, at the behest of the CFR, forced Germany to accept millions of Turkish Muslim guest workers. This was a plan. Had nothing to do with being nice and helping people. So again, it's infuriating to have these idiots act like this is to help people. How dumb are you? Kennedy's special advisor at this time was none other than Henry Kissinger, working for David Rockefeller and representing the oil interests, in particular in terms of the Middle East. So that was what this was really about. That's what the whole 1970s oil crisis was about. But I'm so glad that Ratiu got to the point in Mark Curtis's book where he understood that, hey, wait a minute. That same year, John Kennedy appointed John McCone, CFR director and shareholder in Rockefeller's own Chevron, and then was appointed head of the CIA. Later, in collaboration with MI6, he funded the Muslim Brotherhood. Exactly. I mean, we've lectured through the whole Mark Curtis book, right? Mark Curtis, by the way, is not a conspiracy theorist. He's a Royal Society researcher. Did you hear me? So, another key CFR member was U.S. administration in this administration was John McCloy, longtime Rockefeller associate and representative of their interests, who advised Kennedy for many years after this. In 1970, excuse me, that was 1964, I should say. 1970s, the CFR dominated the U.S. State Department as well, due to the Rockefellers' interest in Aramco. Aramco consisted of oil giants Exxon, Texaco, Mobil, and Chevron, working in collaboration with the U.S. government and the Saudi royal family. They engineered the oil crisis that resulted in soaring oil prices and thus put the West into an unprecedented dependence on Arab investments in oil. That's what the purpose of that was for. It was a deal they cooked up. The 1980s, in collaboration with British, created Pakistani ISI. That's Pakistan's intelligence service, created by the CIA, by the way. The CFR controlled CIA and MI6, was responsible for recruiting and training the Mujahideen. You may know them as Al-Qaeda. And he cites Mark Curtis on the creation of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which is a completely made up Muslim communist organization, 100% fake CIA creation. Supplied this group with sat phones and details on Serbian targets so that NATO could engage in the bombing of Bosnia and NATO and all that. That was all through this stuff. At this time, also left-wing billionaire and CFR member George Soros was able to set up the color revolutions here. This is where we begin to see the exercising of the first color revolutions through Harvard's Gene Sharp's technology of democratic revolution, and that then spawns all the other color revolutions. If you guys remember, we've lectured through all this too, many times. Now Harvard in the U.S. This is fascinating too, because the U.S. is not immune to the promotion of Islam in America either. And in fact, Harvard University becomes, just like Oxford and Cambridge had become the centers of Islam back in the 1920s and 30s, that the Fabians said. Bertrand Russell's like, we need more Islam at the universities. Now, Harvard in the U.S. becomes the ground zero of Islam in the U.S. Which, by the way, I was out in the middle of nowhere and I saw the first time in a middle of nowhere small town. The first time I've ever seen a Anglo-Muslim girl at a restaurant. So why is this going on at Harvard? Well, get this. You may have heard of this guy. In 2005, Harvard received millions of dollars from Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, nephew of Saudi King Fahd, and they created there the Islamic Studies Department. Saudi Arabia's Islamic rulers have for a long time had connections with the Rockefellers and with Harvard University. Rockefeller's Chase Manhattan Bank served as the personal bank to the Saudi royal family. Similarly, bin Talal is a shareholder in Rockefeller CFR Citigroup. And yeah, so why does that matter? Well, isn't that who Tristan has talked about a million times? Is that the same guy? You know what I'm talking about? Isn't he the one that pushes for all this stupid fake meat crap and all the vegan stuff? Who's the vegan guy that I'm going blank on? Tristan's covered him a million times. I don't know anything about all these Saudi people. Yeah, that's him. He's the dad, right? He's like a mega billionaire, right? Isn't he the dad to the dude that pushes all the vegan crap? Somebody in the chat will remember that guy's name. Remember all the goofy vegan videos? What's that guy's name? I'm going blank. Tristan has covered him a million times. Anyway, somebody figured that out. But this is him, because I'm pretty sure that's his dad. That's got to be him. Shake your broccoli. Shake your broccoli. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabians. This is funny. The vegan dude. No, not Vegan Gains. The guy who's like pays all the other vegans to promote it and claims he's a vegan. The Saudi vegan dude. This is his dad. I'm pretty sure. And he owns like a giant Bond yacht. Right? Like a Bond. He has a Bond villain yacht. I'm not joking. We did a whole boiler room on it, I think. Is it Earthling Ed? Isn't he an idiot? I get all these dumb Earthling Ed, Joey Carbstrong. I can't keep up with these lunatics. No, Earthling Ed is not. Although Earthling Ed has been on this dude's thing. I think Tristan said that they give money to Earthling Ed. Somebody's gonna know who I'm talking about. These names are hilarious. Is it Prince Khaled? Is that him? DJ Khaled? Is that who it is? Khaled bin Al-Walid. But doesn't he have a different name on YouTube? This dude's a YouTuber. Is that him? I think he's one of these people involved in this Beyond Meat stuff. Who's the YouTuber guy? It's driving me crazy now. Yeah, that's him. Okay, but then there's another dude that Tristan has covered a million times. But he actually goes on the YouTube channels, right? DJ Kale. We got a bunch of clowns I like it. We got some clever clowns in the chat tonight. Where's Tristan at? Tristana. The guy I'm trying to think of, he's one of the plant-based news. That's it. Who's that? Joey Carbstrong? Is that a Saudi dude? I think, isn't this owned by Prince Al Walid or whatever? Plant-based news. Plant-based news. Let's see. Oh, man. All these people look super unhealthy. Anyway, I don't even know why I'm trying to remember this. Is it Earthling Ed? It's not Earthling Ed. No, he's a Saudi dude, but he doesn't go by his Saudi name. But he has all these vegans on and gives them money. And he has the YouTube channel too. I just can't think of the guy's name. Tristan would know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I think, yeah, we've done 70 pages. So part 2, we'll save that for the part 2. We'll stop there. We've been going for a good while. How long have we been going? 2 hours. That's good. We got a nice 520. No, he's a YouTuber. It's not the Al Walid. It's not the Prince. It's another guy who I think he's related to all of them. Let's see. Let's try this. Top vegan YouTubers. How about that? Top 10 vegan YouTubers. Oh, no. Top 10 vegan influencers. Edgy Veg. Oh, half of these I've never even heard of. Nisha Vor. Never heard of her. High Carb Hannah. Never heard of her. So there's all these chicks that are like the top vegans now, which I guess 4 years ago, there was a bunch of different, it's a different crew because they don't even have Vegan Gains on the, he's not even in the top 10 anymore. Top 7 vegan channels worth subscribing to. Earthling Ed. What a bunch of propaganda. I mean, this is, I can't believe how dumb people are that fall for this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I can't even find that guy anymore. So I guess he just gives money to people. He's not really, like, he's in some videos, but I can't believe none of y'all can figure out who I'm talking about. By the way, if you would hit like and share, I want to remind you guys that we have a great sponsor in chalk.com, the best supplements that you can get, 100% pure, sourced from rainforest. Not joking. We can get the best possible Tonkat Ali for you if you go to chalk.com right now. Use the promo code J50 to get 50% off any of the supplements right now. And if you want an even better discount, you get 60% off if you set up recurring subscriptions, which I think you're going to like it. So I recommend definitely, if you're a guy, you want to up your testosterone, check out the Tonkat Ali. If you're a lady and you want to balance out your hormones, check out the Irish Moss. It's a great product. Or you could do the ashwagandha. Jamie's now really preferring the ashwagandha. That's her favorite thing. But she legit for about 2 months, and she really liked it. It gave her a lot of focus. She read a lot, but she thinks the ashwagandha like calms down a lot of her I guess, because if I'm taking a bunch of this Tonkat and I'm all ramped up, then she's got to calm down because I get her all agitated. Action 2.0, if you're looking for overall action, overall energy boost, that's a great product as well. I would say if you're looking for just kind of overall smoothie food additives, definitely you would like the chocolate. Put that in your morning smoothie routine. That's our last bag of that right there. Jamie drank the rest of it. Yeah, head on over there. Use the promo code J50, automatic 50% off, J60Life, J60LIFE, to get 60% off any recurring subscription. And also, guys, remember, it's not just chalk.com that's an awesome based supporter. We are now allied with Richard Grove, Tragedy and Hope, Richard Grove, Autonomy University, and Grand Theft World. The only podcast out there as good as my podcast. I mean, let's just be honest, right? Grand Theft World, you're talking about Richard rolling out 6-hour lectures on the regular, 6-hour chunks of content. I went and watched that one about British intelligence operations, which partly, again, inspired me to go deeper into this tonight. Richard was throwing out stuff I'd never heard. And he's got some great co-hosts. Grand Theft World is a must-see, must-do podcast. And if you want to get access to Autonomy University, you want to get self-sufficient, you want to learn how to be your own businessman, you want to learn how to critically think on your own, I'm over there doing lectures for autonomy now. We are on the very last lecture next week. Next week is the end of the History of Western Philosophy course. It's going to be, we're up to like 35 hours or something. Okay, so this is a full-on course. After next week, it'll go on sale. I don't know how soon they'll get it up. It might take them a couple weeks to get the whole final edited package together. But yes, the philosophy course will soon be on sale, guys, for a reasonable price. It'll be a lot cheaper than a university philosophy course and a lot better. So look for that in a couple weeks. Yes, I will talk about it nonstop. You're not gonna miss it. You will hear me talk about it, I assure you. So, but be sure to head on over to Rockfin. Now, Richard's on YouTube, but if you want the real full extent of Grand Theft World, I'm talking about the full 6-hour podcast that he does every week, then you want to go over to Rockfin. So subscribe to Grand Theft World on Rockfin. And remember, guys, if you subscribe to Rockfin, you get access to everybody. It's an amazing setup over there. $15, I think. It's either 15 or 20 now. Because of inflation, they had to raise it a little bit. It used to be 10, now it's 15 or 20, I can't remember. But you get everybody. You get Whitney Webb's podcast, you get Richard Grove. And Richard just had Whitney on the other day talking about what I just got in the mail from our publisher. We have the same publisher. One Nation Under Blackmail. Doesn't this look like a bunch of juicy stuff? Absolutely. Maybe you ought to educate yourself on how the world really works. Well, head on over there. Tragedy and Hope. Autonomy University. Autonomy and Autonomy University. And Grand Theft World, which if you get on Rockfin, you get access to everybody's paid content. So you get me, you get Jason Burmis, you get Whitney Webb, you get Sam Tripoli, you get Paul Joseph Watson's over there now. I think Greg Reese is going to start putting stuff over there now. You get, dude, it's getting to where I can't even remember all the people over in Rockfin. Tristan, Isaac, Chiller Queen, all of our buddies are over there at Rockfin. So head on over there, make your account. It's free. You can make a free account, get loads of free content. But if you want the full 6-hour podcast that Richard does, you need to subscribe to Rockfin, and then you're going to get access to all my paid content as well. So you can't beat that. Mel, you $100. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you, Mel. You're such a generous donor with all those fat super chats. Consistently dropping 100. Thank you so much. Joy, $10. Thank you so much, Joy. Appreciate that. Emig, Emigh, $40. Thank you for all your great content. Thank you. Much appreciated. Kristen, after all this heaviness, can you do a sweet dreams of rhythm and dancing, sweet dreams of passion through the night, sweet dreams are taking over, sweet dreams of passion through the night. Ola, ola, hey. There you go. You pay me money, I'll do that. Promethean, $5. Promethean, $6. Thank you for all your years of wisdom. Sharing wisdom. Thank you so much. Thank you for learning and supporting and coming over here. Guys, remember, we're not going to get any algo help. So I need you guys to like, turn on notifications, and share this. Or else it's just nobody, the algorithm will kill us. So fight the algorithm. Fight the algorithm. Fight the algorithms that be. Highland Neurosurgery, 25. This is a multi-generational conspiracy. And I have all the money that can be faked into existence. Oh, they have all the money that can be faked. Exactly. They control the printing press. It is not clear that the Ukraine is eventually going to be nuclear. Like W shit, nuclear. Winner will take all in a campaign to establish world government. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a nuke war. Maybe there's some things I don't know. I mean, but I don't really think it's going to come to that. I don't know. It could be a big global war. I don't know. But I kind of think that the Western evil elites will set up something, a kind of world government, and it'll collapse. I just think it won't work because it's fundamentally evil, anti-human, self-destructive, and something that's that evil and self-destructive, I tend to think will eventually just collapse. All right, if you would hit like and share, thank you guys so much. Remember to comment, blah, 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 all that, do all that stuff, and have a good night. And by the way, if you want part 2, subscribe to Jay's Analysis. This will be up in the next few days when I get through the next 100 pages of the book. And